Phineas P. Gage, living from 1823 to 1860, was an American railroad construction foreman remembered for his improbable survival of an accident in which a large iron rod was driven completely through his head, destroying much of his brain's left frontal lobe, and for that injury's reported effects on his personality and behavior over the remaining 12 years of his life. Effects sufficiently profound that friends saw him, for a time at least, as no longer Gage. Long known as the American Crowbar case, once termed the case which more than all others is calculated to excite our wonder, impair the value of prognosis, and even to subvert our physiological doctrines, Phineas Gage influenced 19th century discussion about the mind and brain, particularly debate on cerebral localization, and was perhaps the first case to suggest the brain's role in determining personality, and that damage to specific parts of the brain might induce specific mental changes. Gage is a fixture of the curricula of neurology, psychology, and neuroscience, one of the great medical curiosities of all time, and a living part of the medical folklore, frequently mentioned in books and scientific papers. He even has a minor place in popular culture. Despite this celebrity, the body of established fact about Gage and what he was like, whether before or after his injury, is small, which has allowed the fitting of almost any theory desired to the small number of facts we have. Gage acting as a Rorschach inkblot in which proponents of various conflicting theories of the brain all saw support for their views. Historically, published accounts of Gage, including scientific ones, have almost always severely exaggerated and distorted his behavioral changes, frequently contradicting the known facts. A report of Gage's physical and mental conditions shortly before his death implies that his most serious mental changes were temporary, so that in later life he was far more functional and socially far better adapted than in the years immediately following his accident. A social recovery hypothesis suggests that his work as a stagecoach driver in Chile fostered this recovery by providing daily structure that allowed him to regain lost social and personal skills. I've been a big fan of Jack Quaid's ever since the first season of watching The Boys, so when I heard about his leading man opportunities, I was naturally excited for him and his career. He also impressed me, especially through his comments about being called a Nepo baby, saying, "I am an immensely privileged person, was able to get representation pretty early on, and that's more than half the battle. I knew the door was open for me in a lot of ways, that it's just not for a lot of actors. And I've just tried to work as hard as I possibly can to prove that I deserve to walk through that door." His ability to understand something so basic that nobody in Hollywood seems to get gives me the impression that this guy is down to earth and that he understands his excess. The nepotism doesn't detract from his ability, and these comments recognize a truth about the industry that many people are willing to ignore. So on one hand, I appreciate what he's saying from a moral perspective, and on the other, I have more respect for a performer that's able to come to that conclusion intellectually. When I saw the trailers, though, I have to admit I was not excited, and after seeing the film, it's even worse than what I expected it to be. For a couple months, I worked as someone that does script coverage, as in someone that takes scripts sent into a studio and summarizes them for higher levels to make a decision on whether or not they want to continue with the idea. Through that process, I'm basically weeding out the shit scripts, and there are a lot of them. Mostly, they have problems with character motivation or plot issues that just feel corny and bad. This is the kind of script where I don't understand how it got past the script coverage stage. I mean, the main character is a walking red flag, making strange and creepy decisions that with different music would have been a different kind of movie entirely. He was unlikable, despite Jack Quaid's best efforts, and there wasn't much about the guy that made him intriguing. His character development is fairly non-existent, and I question whether this film has an ability to really analyze what makes these moral issues important. Every plot point that could have been made interesting by introducing a little gray was altered to hand the solution to Quaid on a silver platter. It just made no attempt to be interesting, and so you might say, okay, well, it's not meant to be any deep dissection of human consciousness. It's just meant to be a fun movie. And to that I would say, that does a huge disservice to films that actually manage to be entertaining. When a studio makes a film, they make one of two choices: to make a vehicle for entertainment or to make a movie that says something about the world. I don't mean to bag on films that entertain, many of which that I love. I love the Fast and Furious movies. I love the Mission Impossible movies. And I understand the level of technical quality it takes to make films like those. First of all, they have to be charismatic. I think in many ways charisma is about accepting the inner weirdness genius you have and showing it to the rest of the world. It's what can separate a person or a project from their contemporaries. This film has none of that. What it had were cardboard cutout characters, weak one-liners, and not a single joke that I remember, save an offhanded comment about the Chargers leaving San Diego. Alright, so you don't have charisma though. We can still work with that. It's an action movie, right? So how was the action? Completely unmemorable. They rely too heavily on Quaid's ability to not feel pain, and it never feels like he's actually under any sense of danger. It's basic stuff that doesn't really have a spin of its own. It lacks tension, it lacks capability. It never builds, it only starts, and then it stops. So no, there is nothing fun about this movie, and to quantify it as just a fun movie is condescending to other films that actually manage to be entertaining. I mean, really, I'm flabbergasted at how good the reviews are. In what world does a film like this get 80% on Rotten Tomatoes? If I were being extremely optimistic, I would believe 60. But 80? What am I missing here? Every character makes decisions that are unbelievably boneheaded. From the beginning, there's just a laughable amount of ineptitude, from the robbers shooting people for no reason, to the cops being unable to track these guys that are clearly not hiding very well, to strangers putting their lives in the hands of people that they clearly should not be trusting. It gets to a point where nothing matters anymore, so you stop caring about what's going to happen. Clearly, it doesn't matter. The movie's going to contrive itself however it wants to get the characters in the room together. It was just lazy writing. And I hate lazy writing because what's even the fucking point of writing it? I swear to God, man, I'm peeved. This movie peeved me out. Let's talk about the performances. Quaid's definitely the best part, although it becomes clear what he's bringing to the table from about 10 minutes in. I can understand why he took a role like this. I mean, it's not like leading man opportunities come around very often. I do believe in his ability, but I also think he should be more careful with the kind of projects he decides to work on, because he isn't good enough at this point to elevate the stuff he's performing in. Jacob Batalon isn't in the movie nearly as much as I thought he would be, and I don't consider that a spoiler as much as I consider it misleading from the trailers. When he is in the movie, he's tired and he looks unmotivated to give more than his appearance. I hadn't heard of Amber Midthunder. It looks like she was in Prey, which I heard was good, and Legion, which I only saw the beginning of, but I know was good. I'm not leaving this movie with a strong impression of her though, and considering everyone else was bad, I guess we can call it a wash and start from zero next time. Clearly there's something deeper wrong with this than just the performances. Matt Walsh was in this too. He's the guy from Veep, if you've ever seen Veep. He rules in Veep. I'm sorry, Matt Walsh, you deserve better. Oh, and Ray Nicholson plays the villain. It would be unoriginal to call him bad, so I'll just say nothing at all. I was originally going to watch Opus last night, but my sister convinced me to watch this movie instead, after 3 margaritas in. I will never forgive you, Isabel. You have truly forsaken me. I hope you are happy. I know Opus has bad reviews, but it's gotta be better than this. It's hard for me to write this review because I lack the passion to actually break it down. Here it is though, and I don't have to talk about it anymore. I'll give it a Verne.